prepared remarks, then we'll get to your Q&A. I want to start off talking about the budget process. The budget process here at City Hall is obviously in full swing. We heard from the budget office last week. They released what they call their suggested budget, their recommended budget last week. I'll be releasing my proposed budget sometime later this spring, before in the early weeks of May. When I first became mayor with regard to the budget, I said there were two things I wanted to do. The first was to stabilize the city's budget, and the second was to increase transparency around the budget. With regard to stabilization, in year one, I asked for 5% constraint reductions. That was very difficult for city bureaus and the city council to adapt to, but we set clear priorities. We made some tough choices. We reorganized the way we conducted business in a number of bureaus, and we met our budgetary requirements. As a result of those tough choices, this year we're only asking for a 1% constraint reduction. Even so, that's still going to be a tall order. So while we've made some progress with regard to budget stability, I think we have a long way to go. Anybody who's ever picked up a copy of the city's budget and tried to understand it quickly knows that the way we currently budget, the way we report, the way we provide information to the public is a long way from easy to understand or transparent. And so that's why this year I proposed and we implemented a significant reform of our budget process here at City Hall. Rather than just relying on bureau by bureau budgeting and then leaving it up to the public or others to go through the budget and try to ferret out where the sources are coming from, how we're spending our money, what kinds of outcomes we're getting, we are now going to be budgeting on a programmatic level. So program by program, you'll have a clear understanding of what our level of expenditure is, how much overhead is going towards that program, how many personnel are associated with that program, what the objectives of the program are and how government is organizing to achieve those objectives, and what the measurable outcomes are for each of our program areas. This is going to allow us for more clarity in terms of the goals that we're seeking. It'll also make it easier for us to understand where our priorities lie. With regard to my priorities in the budget, I get asked this a lot, so I know I've stated this before, but I'll reiterate it. Again, the most significant long-term issue facing the city continues to be the crisis that's unfolding on our streets, those on our streets who are experiencing homelessness, those who have substance abuse issues, those who are living with mental illness, and others in crisis. We will continue to support funding to get people off the streets and keep them off the streets. In addition, we'll continue to support the Housing Bureau and its efforts to create a diversity of affordable housing options. We want to be good stewards of the taxpayers' money that they entrusted us with when they voted for both the regional affordable housing bond most recently and the City of Portland housing bond, which was voted on 2 years ago. In addition, livability, things like making sure that the city is clean, that trash is picked up, that we've remediated graffiti or other potential environmental or public health issues. That will continue to be a priority. Around policing, I want to continue to make sure that we have a police bureau that is accountable and relevant to the public that we serve. And of course, we're going to continue our investments in the Build Program initiative that we founded last year. The Build Portland program will enable us to invest in long neglected infrastructure. You'll remember that last year we supported the first 7 pilot programs, pilot investments under the Build Portland program. That included everything from hospitals to school facilities to critical business infrastructure, and this year I look forward to expanding those opportunities. Shifting gears a little bit, you have heard me state that a key priority, an umbrella priority for this administration, is to provide opportunities for shared economic prosperity that include everybody in the city of Portland. From my perspective, being successful in this arena is about a basic sense of fairness, a basic sense of justice in our community. And you know that I talk at great length about how historic racism in this community, previous systematic structures that we've had in place, everything around urban renewal to where we locate transportation infrastructure, access to education and job training opportunities, access to intergenerational wealth through investing in housing and other means of generating economic prosperity have not been shared equally in this community. It's been very important for my administration to take intentional steps to ensure that we do create shared economic opportunities for everyone in our community. I just mentioned affordable housing, and I just want to put a little bit of a marker out there. People cannot be successful in housing, no matter how affordable it is, if they don't have access to economic opportunity. People will only be successful in the housing that we create, or the housing that we help facilitate, or the housing that the private sector builds on its own volition, if people also have the economic wherewithal to be successful in that housing. And that's why I'm so excited to tell you about my new initiative. It's called Portland Means Progress. This calls on businesses to do a couple of things, including paying a $15 an hour minimum wage. And to participate in Portland Means Progress, employers also have to agree to take one of several steps. And I'll get to that in just a moment. But first, I want to talk a little bit about how we created the Portland Means Progress initiative. As some people may be aware, I have a council of economic advisors that helps advise me and shape policies around creating shared economic prosperity opportunities in Portland. The council has about 40 members. Those members come from the government sector. They come from employment, from employers in our community. It includes folks from the academic sector. It includes representatives from local labor unions and many, many others. And in looking at this question of shared economic prosperity, we spent the better part of a year identifying strategies that could help us achieve those shared economic prosperity goals. We identified over 50 different potential strategies. We then boiled them down into what we thought were the 3 best strategies, the 3 that had the highest likelihood of being implemented quickly, that could create the most pathways to economic progress for those who have historically been left behind. That is what the Portland Means Progress initiative is. It is the compilation of those top 3 strategies. So, as I mentioned, it calls on participants, those who sign up, those employers that sign up for the Portland Means Progress initiative, to agree to pay their employees a minimum of $15 an hour, and then do at least one of 3 different things. Number 1, provide work experience opportunities for underrepresented youth. Number 2, purchase goods and services from local minority-owned businesses. And or number 3, engage in diversity, equity, and inclusion training in your workforce, in your workplace, to demonstrate a commitment to creating a culture of diversity. That's what Portland Means Progress is. It's to connect businesses to proven programs that support these actions so that the private sector can make a difference in using existing resources and programs. Staff from Prosper Portland, staff from my administration, including me personally, we've been developing this framework for some time. Over the last 6 months, we've met with over 100 employers in the local community to talk about how best to roll this program out, how to shape it, how to refine it. And I'm very gratified to see the strong response we've received from local employers. They not only helped us shape it, they not only said it was a good idea, many of them said it is absolutely imperative that we do this in our community. Not only because it's the just thing to do, not because it is a quality response to historic exclusion in our community, but because it's a business imperative in today's economy. It's good for the bottom line. It is good business to follow these practices that are being established through the Portland Means Progress initiative. I'm pleased that we now have several dozen companies that are committed to the Portland Means Progress initiative. We're looking for other companies to join us for a pilot program over the course of the next 6 months. If you are an employer and you'd like to participate in this program, or if you'd like somebody to reach out to you and tell you more about what this program specifically involves and the opportunities that exist, we'd like to hear from you. The easiest way to get connected to this program is through our website, which can be found at portlandmeansprogress.com. On a different note, I was deeply saddened to hear about acts of reported violence against members of the LGBTQ community here in the city of Portland. These reports have been showing up in some cases on social media. I know that these instances of hate and fear are not isolated instances, and while there's been a lot of public attention, the media has certainly put a spotlight on this, and I thank all of you for that, because I think it is important that it be highlighted in the way it has been. We know that these things happen all the time. This is not something that's just new in the last couple of weeks. It's something that's persistent. And I want people to know that as the mayor of this community and as the police commissioner, I'm aware of these issues. I take them very seriously. And I want members of the LGBTQ community to know that I stand with you. And my staff stands with you. We have asked the Police Bureau through Chief Outlaw to make sure that if anybody reports one of these crimes to the LGBTQ community, that it be prioritized, that it get the attention that it deserves. My leadership team, including my Chief of Staff and other members of my team, have met with representatives and leaders of the LGBT community locally and let them know that we stand with them and that we want to help in any way that they deem appropriate. The Q Center recently had an open public forum, and members of my team were there as well to listen, to take notes, to see if there weren't other ways that we could be more helpful. And I just want the community to know through you that they have an open line to my office. And if there's any way I can be helpful personally, or if there's any way that any member of my staff can be helpful, we absolutely seek to do it. So thank you for your patience. With that, I will turn it over to you for whatever questions you may have. Thank you for being here.
Portland Means Progress. So what are the incentives for employers to become part of that program?
I'd say the main incentive is if you become a member of the Portland Means Progress program, you are committing to diversifying your workforce. You are opening up new pipelines to job training for young people who have disproportionately high rates of unemployment at a time when many businesses in our community are struggling to find quality employees. So you are now creating an open pipeline of employment to your own company, which is something people here need. And if you want to be competitive in this environment in terms of recruiting and retaining quality employees, you need to have a strong narrative around diversity. And by putting your name on the bottom line, because this does require an overt commitment from those employers who participate, you are also able to use the Portland Means Progress logo. You're able to publicly state that you are part of this commitment, and we, along with our partners at Prosper Portland and Work Systems, Inc., will continue to highlight your engagement in this program. And as some employers told us when they said it was an imperative that we participate in this, what they meant is we cannot continue to be economically viable and we cannot be an employer of choice if we aren't demonstrating a strong commitment to diversity in the workforce. And this program, we designed it so it is as seamless as possible for employers. It's as easy as possible. In other words, we're trying to create plug-and-play opportunities for employers who are serious about this, but maybe don't know the best way to actually begin diversifying their workforce. As just sort of a side note, I will note that we had really strong interest from the high technology community, particularly smaller technology companies. And they came to us with a frame of reference that they understand that technology companies are under a lot of scrutiny right now to be more diverse in terms of people of color and women amongst their ranks. But some were really honest with us and just said, we're not really sure how to best approach this. And so in helping to shape this program, they made it clear that for them to participate fully and effectively required the program to be seamless, easy to connect to, and not a whole lot of extra administrative chores. And so this program and the pilot that we'll be engaging in with our first select group of participants takes all of that into account. So it's important from a recruiting and retention perspective. It's important to make a strong narrative about diversity. And in this program gives people not only a high-profile opportunity to participate, but we make it as easy as possible for them to do so.
Can you address the proposed resolution on 5G rollout? Is that still going forward Wednesday? And is it, just kind of explain your stance?
Yeah, you bet. So 5G, of course, is the latest technology for wireless devices. 5G is coming our way. There's two aspects to this new technology deployment that are specifically relevant to the Portland City Council. First of all, in order for 5G to work, the way it's different than other previous technologies is this is what's called small cell technology. So you're going to see lots and lots of these wireless components throughout the community. The federal government has made something of a land grab against local infrastructure, like telephone poles, where these wireless nodes would be connected. The federal government, through the FCC, has tried to pass an administrative rule that would take our cities and every other cities around the country's ability to regulate that public infrastructure away from us and give that authority to the federal government. It would also take away our ability to charge fees to recover the cost of allowing private sector wireless providers access to our city's infrastructure. Infrastructure which, by the way, for which our local taxpayers have paid literally billions of dollars over the decade, and for which we have paid many hundreds of millions more to maintain. The federal government is trying to take control, and we at City Hall take a dim view to that. And other city councils all around the country share our concern about that effective land grab. The second component to this also important, is for 5G to roll out and be successful in this environment, the public has to have confidence that this technology is in the best interest of the public. And one snag in building public trust for the rollout of 5G is increasing concerns about the potential health risks of this new generation of wireless technology. There were some 128, I might be, give or take, but 120 something prominent scientists from 36 different countries that asked the European Union to delay the implementation of 5G because of what they believe are significant long-term health impacts of 5G wireless technology. What we're asking for, and this is the second component in addition to fighting the land grab from the federal government, is we are asking the federal government, please engage and use your public health resources to study the long-term health impacts or potential health impacts of 5G. And it may well be that there are no long-term health impacts to rolling out 5G. But until the public has some degree of confidence that the science supports the rollout of this technology, there's always going to be that question circulating about whether or not this is healthy or not for the public. And so my attitude is, since we're rolling out the 5G technologies nationally, let's study the health impacts. I don't think that's an unreasonable ask, and that's what our resolution asks the federal government to do.
Touching on that, I understand the health impacts. I'm just curious if you can go back to the land grab part.
Sure.
Is that something that you can even do anything about?
We don't control the entire dialogue. We don't control the narrative. And so our best strategy right now is to get the FCC to change its administrative rule making or change the way that they are able to implement administrative rule making. And right now this is in the court system. The city of Portland has actually been a leader in this litigation. I've had the opportunity at the U.S. Conference of Mayors to speak to many other mayors who are concerned about this issue around the country. More and more cities are joining on to our legal position, and perhaps the most positive thing that's developed from a legal perspective in recent months is we were successfully able to move this to the Ninth Circuit Court, where we think we'll get a better hearing for this issue. But it's a very important issue. This really gets to the question of local control. And again, this isn't something new. We're talking about infrastructure that our taxpayers have paid for generations. And our taxpayers have funded the maintenance of this infrastructure for generations. And we have been able to control the rents that we as a municipality charge to private sector businesses for the privilege of locating their technology on the public's infrastructure. And the federal government is trying to preempt us across the board. And that's why I call it a land grab. That's exactly what it is. We already paid for it. We've been maintaining it, and now they want to take it away at pennies on the dollar. They don't even want us to be able to control the fees that we charge to recover the costs of maintaining that infrastructure. That's just wrong. Yes, sir.
Is the city still negotiating with the companies that want to bring 5G here?
Yes.
How's that going?
We are still in negotiation with companies that want to bring 5G here. I am not personally engaged in those negotiations on a one-on-one basis, but I do get reports back, and it's my understanding that those have actually been very fruitful conversations. They've been very productive. Our local wireless providers seem to understand what our interests and our needs are, but whether or not we actually can reach an agreement, that's up to the City Council at the end of the day. But those conversations are ongoing, Gordon.
Is there a timeline?
I don't have a timeline.
Just one other follow-up.
Yes, you bet.
Are you saying that these companies are given permission by the FCC to basically just say, we're going to put a little 5G cell tower on any light pole in the city of Portland, and they're not going to pay for it? Is that how it works? In its most basic sense.
In its most basic sense, yes. I don't think it's the FCC's intent, just being fair and honest. I don't think it's their intent to say you won't get reimbursed at all. I don't think they're saying the number is zero, but it's substantially less than what we charge for cost recovery. And that's the problem I have. And if you think about all the other areas where the federal government has backed off and then foisted costs on local governments, here comes another one. And I'm in a position where I can do something about that. And mayors all across this country feel the same way I do. We're not going to let them do it.
So I understand that your advisor, Dirk Nelson, was liaising with Multnomah County prosecutors involving this mutual combat defense that some say was being wrongly applied to the protesters. I understand he's left the private sector, so is that
Yeah, so Burke is still here, so I'm going to give him fair shot at answering this question the way he wants, but I'll answer it first and I'll give Burke the last word. Burke's job as my public safety liaison is to have these contacts and these communications with our local law enforcement partners, our prosecutorial partners, the court system, and anybody else engaged in the criminal justice system. And it is my personal view, having listened to several people talk about this, that the idea of mutual combat first came from the district attorney's office. We don't create laws. When it comes to the laws that the police bureau engage, we rely heavily on others in the criminal justice system for advice. Obviously, when it comes to our ability to prosecute somebody, we rely almost exclusively on advice that we get from the district attorney's office. And it's my understanding, and Burke can correct me if I'm wrong, that that concept of mutual combat first came from the district attorney's office, and I would let them answer that question. But I want to say this also because it's important to this context. The reason the conversation happened at all was I had seen the videotape from the street brawl outside Kelly's Olympian, and I wasn't the only one. People saw it locally, people saw it all across the state, people saw it all across the nation, and it was even broadcast internationally that Portland, Oregon has this street fight. And I was hearing from the people who I work for, which is all of you, that you wanted me to bring an end to these roving, semi-sanctioned street brawls on the streets of our community. And as I watched the videotape, as not only the mayor, but as somebody who's very concerned about my community and safety in the community, I could not reconcile how what I was seeing on that tape could possibly be sanctioned or legal. And so my question was first of the police bureau. Why aren't you arresting these people? In what city is it okay? In what city is it legal to engage in a street brawl? And so that was my question. And the answer came back, well, we've gotten this advice from the district attorney that there's something in Oregon statute called mutual combat, and if you don't have a witness who's willing to come forward, and if you don't have somebody who's willing to admit that they were a victim, or if two people had agreed to arrange to have a fight, it would make it very, very difficult to prosecute. That's what came back to me. And that was an unacceptable answer for me, obviously. And I said so a number of months ago that I do not sanction, I do not support, and I do not accept street fights on the streets of this city. And even if two people agree to fight, they cannot do it on the streets of this city because it puts other people's safety in jeopardy. And so I found it useful when people started raising the question about whether mutual combat was a thing at all. And it turns out, guess what? It's not. Burke?
Good morning, everyone. Burke Nelson, still the current senior advisor for Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler. So when I was here last time at the press conference and I raised the issue of mutual combat, I was speaking from layman's terms. So there's a difference between the ORS statute for mutual combat and what the DA and I were discussing in regards to mutual combat. So when I was referring to the videos and the DA and I discussed how we can go about bringing charges against individuals who are coming to the street to fight and causing disruption and violence within the city of Portland, when I was talking about mutual combat, it was coming from the world and the realm of self-defense. So 2 videos, as I stated last time I was up here, where the DA and PPB got together and showed me and demonstrated what they were looking at in regards to trying to bring charges against the street brawl that was out in front of Kelly's Olympian. So video, they showed me 2 groups getting together, a masked individual fires a bear can spray at another group of demonstrators, and then a brawl broke out after that. So that's more in the world of self-defense. then the ORS statute for mutual combat is more along the lines of something like this. So if hypothetically an individual puts on social media or whatever, some other type of medium saying, hey, I'm going down to Tom McCall Park at 3 p.m. on Saturday. I challenge anyone to come down there and face me, and we can have a fight, a mutual fight, one-on-one, mano-a-mano type thing. That is something that the Oregon statute looks at that is not allowed, that is illegal. That is something that can be prosecuted. So that's the difference between the two. I hope that provides some clarification from what I was talking about. It could be argued to be self-defense. That's the issue. So if someone initiates an action and someone retaliates from that initiation, that's where it gets a little bit muddy, and that's why the prosecutors are having some trouble bringing charges. Because no one has come forward. So there needs to be a victim, as the mayor stated. No one's come forward saying, I'm a victim. Please, make sure that you are pursuing this. But I'm not saying that the DA's office is not doing something right now and trying to find charges in which to bring these individuals to justice. The other problem they're having is identifying these individuals. Some of them are masked, some of them are unmasked, but trying to locate and identify these individuals is presenting somewhat of a problem. Right. So in that circumstance, you need to take in the totality of the circumstances. So depending on how many police officers are there at that time, let's say 2, 3, they also have to take into account the dangerousness of going into a crowd like that, extracting certain individuals for arrest, when at this time you don't know if anyone's carrying a weapon, if they're also putting their other officers at risk. So sometimes it's more, it's a better safety precaution to go and try and identify these people later and get them at a safer time and place than it is to go into a mob and crowd and pull people out for arrest.
Is there a directive that tells the police not to go into crowds and execute arrests?
I don't think there is a directive that exists like that, but at the same time, they need to take into account the totality of the circumstances when it comes to safety of the public and themselves as well.
Thanks, Mark. Now I'm going to give you my specific view on this. While I understand that it is very difficult for the police to make a decision sometimes at that moment as to whether that is the right moment to go in, it would be my expectation that based on video review, to the degree that they can identify perpetrators of violence on the streets, and given that they have a clear understanding of what statute is, and if there is a law that is violated, I would expect them to make an arrest, particularly in such a high-profile case as this, where the credibility of the city and the reputation of the city is on the line. I would never be so crass as mayor or as police commissioner to say that I'm in a position to say who should or should not be arrested. I think that walks us down a dangerous road. But in reviewing the videotape and in listening to what other people who are experts in criminal law were saying, I believe that we could have acted much faster to arrest people and cut it off. And it is even more concerning to me that this concept of mutual combat has been convoluted and watered down to the degree that even Joey Gibson is quoting it as a potential mitigating factor in coming to Portland and engaging in street brawls. Come on, folks, we're overcomplicating this. You're not allowed to fight on the streets of this city. Don't come here and fight on the streets of the city. If you come here and you fight on our sidewalks and we find that you have broken any law or any rule, we will hold you to it. We will enforce it. It is not acceptable behavior under any circumstances. How am I supposed to explain this to my 12-year-old daughter, that we allow adults to fight on the streets of our city? Is there anybody here who actually thinks that this is a good idea? I don't. And if there is something in state statute, if there is something in the law, if there is something in code that says people who come here and engage in violence have not broken any rules or broken any laws, then we need to change the rules and we need to change the laws. And by the way, if you want to come here and fight somebody and you've got somebody in mind and they agree, can you do us all a favor? Rent a boxing ring. They're available. The streets of our community are not a boxing ring. It is not acceptable under any circumstances. Yes, sir.
So have you issued any orders or directives, or police issued any orders or directives, or anyone else to actually say, when we see someone fighting, whether it's a Joey Gibson event, whether it's just a brawl in a bar out of East Portland, whatever it might be, to intervene and make threats?
I have made my frustration on this subject eminently clear to all parties involved. And that's why I called for the meeting that we had around this question of mutual combat. I'd never heard of mutual combat before. And so I'm glad that I have experts like Burke and others who can help me understand this. Again, I think sometimes in this community we overcomplicate things. If you go into a school and you get into a brawl, there are consequences. If you go into a church and you get into a brawl, there are consequences. If you go into a bar and you get into a brawl, there are consequences. And so I can't believe that you can just be anywhere else on the streets of our city and there are no consequences. That doesn't sit well by me.
So have you made a specific ask of the police bureau or any of their officials?
You mean, would I be so crass and so thoughtless as police commissioner and mayors to say arrest him now and sort it out later? No, I have not made that because I don't think that's an appropriate statement for me to make as mayor. But I think it is appropriate for me to say, if these are truly the rules and our hands are truly tied, then we need to change the rules and we need to untie our hands. This is not acceptable. And in cities all across the country, they're looking at us going, what the heck? We'd arrest these people. So if there's something different here, we need to fix it. We need to change it. We need to address it.
Switching topics for a moment.
Sure.
We've had a letter from Disability Rights Oregon asking the city to take another look at scooters on sidewalks and the potential for scooters on sidewalks being blocking the right of way and blocking disabilities access to pedestrian pathways. So have you been working on this at all, or any thoughts on when these electric scooters will be coming back to the city?
So here's one of the fine nuances of our commission form of government. No, I personally have not been involved in this at all. Commissioner Chloe Udaly is the transportation commissioner. I certainly have strong feelings about this, though. I have visited enough cities around this country that have scooters in place to know this is a legitimate problem. This is a legitimate concern, and it is not an inconsequential problem or concern. This notion that some people, when they're done with their scooters, they simply dump them on the sidewalk or they leave them in another obvious public right-of-way. I was even in Tempe, Arizona not too long ago, and I watched somebody lean a scooter up against the door of a pharmacy that was still in business, still operating. And so one of the questions I have for my friends at the scooter company is, what are you doing to address this problem? And going forward, I don't think public support will last for scooters if this issue is not overtly and intentionally addressed. Because I've seen it become a very big issue in other cities. And it's very frustrating to anybody to have to walk around or over or move a scooter out of the way because somebody who is a user has been thoughtless about taking it the last 2 feet and getting it out of the way. But if you are vision impaired, think about that. Or if you're elderly and you just can't see the scooter that's right there. I mean, falls kill older adults. And the idea that somebody would just leave a scooter sitting there, it's a real problem and we can't wish it away. It's going to happen, and so my question is, how are we going to address it? And You know, if it were up to me, I'd say we confiscate the scooter and we sell it to the highest bidder on eBay. And we do it over and over and over again until the companies come up with the solution that they've been promising for a long time, which is they will address this issue. I don't know what they're doing, but they're going to need to do it if they want this technology to really catch on. It's a great technology. It's a good last mile transportation strategy. I've done it, I'll confess. It's a heck of a lot of fun. Yes, I wore a helmet. Yes, I put it aside properly. But there are also problems with this technology. And one of the problems with the technology is overcoming human nature. But they can do it. They're smart people. I'm sure they'll figure it out. Yes, sir.
Switching gears once again, also on
Then I'll get James.
body cameras this week. Talking about giving $1.6 million, I believe. Can you describe those, James, and what you would hope comes of body cameras?
Yeah, great. Thank you for the question because there's a little bit of confusion around this. First of all, I want you to know, in all likelihood, I will pull the body camera issue off of this week's agenda because I want to make sure that, there's no huge urgency to this issue. It doesn't have to be passed this week. And there is some confusion out there about exactly how this is unfolding. The $1.6 million was actually allocated years ago. I want to say it was like in 2014, maybe it was 2015. It's just been rolled over year after year after year as sort of a pot of funding that could be used for body cams or a body cam pilot program at some point. All that the current item on the agenda asks to do is issue a request for proposals for multiple companies or vendors who could then lay out a 6-month pilot program for the city of Portland. What it would look like, what it would entail, how the data would be used, how they'd recommend the cameras be deployed amongst some percentage of our street-based officers, and what it would cost. And that's all to be determined, all of that. So all that we are asking at this stage in the game is for permission to issue the request for proposals and then see what we get back. Meanwhile, further complicating this, the Police Bureau is having a separate set of conversations with the public. They are in a public engagement process to help determine policy for when body-worn cameras become a reality bureau-wide. And so I think all these things, the $1.6 million carryover, the RFP for the pilot program, the conversations the Police Bureau is having about the long-term policies around body cams, those things have all gotten conflated and it's confused things a bit. So I just want to take a step back and work with my colleagues and make sure that they, at the end of the day, are as confident about this as I am. Yes, I'm sorry, and I apologize. Thank you for your patience.
Just follow up on that. With that, are you still looking at having the program, the pilot program in place next year?
The timeline that we've worked out, and as you know, timelines can always slip for various reasons. We don't always control all aspects of all things. But the proposed timeline would be to issue the RFP sometime soon. If not this week, hopefully soon. And we would hopefully have a pilot up and running. Ideally, it would be in the approximate July 1 through December 31st timeframe, although that's subject to potentially change a little bit. But I'd like to have the bigger discussion about the overall program in next year's budget process, meaning the one deadline I do see for us is that by June of 2020, we really do have to know what the future of the body cam program is bureau-wide, and we have to have agreed on the policies and procedures for that program, so when the cameras are on, when the cameras are off. And the biggest question of all that we're answering, finances aside, I mean, we all know money is a big issue, but the biggest question around body cams is how do you balance two competing goals, two competing priorities? Transparency on one hand and privacy on the other. Because with increased transparency, which body cams are designed to provide, comes increased concerns about privacy. And so the conversations we're engaged now is where are we going to draw that line between transparency and privacy? And that has to be codified in policy. And so we've got about a year to really do that hard work.
Switching gears, parks, saying that they've got going in $7 million deficit. Do you have questions as to why that is? Really, why we seem to have this problem?
I reformed the budget process. I moved us onto the programmatic strategy, as I mentioned earlier. So the Parks Bureau, in implementing my proposed strategy, undertook an exercise that they described as basically going back to a zero-based budgeting model. In other words, they went back and rebuilt their budget from the ground up. Commissioner Fish has been very strong on this issue. He has been very transparent with me about what they have discovered as they've moved away from a bureau-wide budget to a programmatic budget. And what his budget team in the Parks Bureau has uncovered is over a period of years, well, I should step back and say this, about 25% of the Parks Bureau budget comes from the collection of fees. About 50% of the recreation budget comes from the collection of fees. And in recent years, the costs of operating the Parks Bureau, and that's mostly human resource costs, personnel costs, have gone up much faster than the increase in fees to help recover our costs. The Parks Bureau has been employing a number of strategies, including using one-time only funding, or in some cases even falling behind on necessary ongoing expenditures in order to close that gap. That has created this deficit. So first of all, I want to thank Commissioner Fish for taking this new process seriously and being open and honest and transparent about the deficits that he and his team have discovered in the Parks Bureau. They're not alone. They're not alone. So we anticipate more of these problems will be revealed with this new reform budget process, but that's exactly why we did it. We can't really get onto financial stability, nor can we really be accountable and transparent to the public without this kind of exercise where we're going back and basically building our budgets from scratch and being much more transparent about what are the expenditures in each program and what are we actually buying with our limited funding, with our limited funds. So that's what I know. The commissioner, I think, will make a strong argument during the upcoming budget process to help mitigate reductions that could otherwise result from that $7 million shortfall, but that's a conversation that the council will have in spades in the coming months. You know, I think I'll leave that to the Parks Commissioner to answer that question. My suspicion is they're looking at a wide variety of possibilities, and the Parks Bureau, does anybody know what date the work session is for the Parks Bureau? It's April? March 19th, isn't that what I said? On March 19th is the work session for the Parks Bureau, and I'm sure at that presentation they'll disclose some of the ideas they have by then. And I want to give our new Parks Commissioner, or our new Parks Director, Dana Long, she is fantastic. I've now been in 2 longish meetings with her, 2 longish presentations, and she is very much up to this task. She came in recognizing the importance of addressing this issue, and I look forward to hearing what she recommends, along with Commissioner Fish. Yes, sir.
Clarify some of the language used on 5G. You mentioned litigation and Ninth Circuit. Can you specify where the city is? Is there a lawsuit that the city's engaged in, or
yeah, you know, when it gets to specific legal terms, can I get back to you with actually somebody from the legal department, so just so I don't misstep or lead you astray on the specific nomenclature? My understanding is yes, there is, but Kristen is shaking her head yes, and she would know, so yes. Okay, can you make sure that you connect with Kristen behind you, and we'll get you an answer today on that? Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, Gordon.
Going back to the mutual combat discussion, so can you give us a little more detail about where the city got its advice that this mutual combat was a defense, and who got the advice from?
Yeah, so I'm giving you hearsay. It is my understanding, based on what I know today, that that advice came from the Office of the District Attorney. And it came to the Police Bureau. Unless Burke tells me that's completely wrong. Okay.
And one other thing, can you give an update on what your office wants to do, plans to do, in regards to the Zenith Energy?
Yes, thank you for asking. So I have reached out to representatives of Zenith. I want to meet with them, and I want to get all the facts. What's broadly been reported is that Zenith intends to expand their facilities on the river, that they are intending to import tar sands from potentially multiple sources, including the Dakotas and Canada, and they are potentially interested in exporting those materials to markets overseas. So I want to meet with them and find out if that is in fact their true intention. If that is their true intention, I am opposed. It was less than 3 years ago that we had an oil train going through the Columbia River Gorge that derailed in Mosier, and it created a public health, a public safety, and an environmental hazard. And I am very concerned about any attempt to expand fossil fuel infrastructure in the city of Portland that would bring more oil trains through our community. And I am doubly opposed to the city of Portland finding itself in a position of being potentially an export colony of fossil fuels for markets overseas. That does not sit well with me. Now, the permit that was issued for this facility, as I understand it at this point, was issued in 2014. That's before the City Council passed its resolution in 2016 limiting the expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure in our community. I supported, by the way, I wasn't on the City Council, but I publicly supported that resolution. The resolution was based on the value that we as a city should be seeking clean energy alternatives. We should be seeking employment opportunities that are not engaged in the import and export of fossil fuel opportunities. And that's where I am. If that is in fact what they're proposing to do, I am profoundly opposed, and I will work with others who agree with me on that. Now, there's another side to this story that I also want to ask him about. The entire oil farm is built in a liquefaction zone, in a seismic zone. And I've had some conversations with owners of oil infrastructure in that area, fossil fuel infrastructure, who say we should be encouraging the hardening of those tanks. We should be encouraging them to do everything they can to make sure that that oil infrastructure is seismically resilient. I agree with that. So I need to meet with the folks at Zenith and find out what their actual intentions are. I need to hear it from them, and that will help me determine what my course is going forward. Yes, sir.
Just want to get this one in. We are getting there's rules out there that say, you have to have affordable housing, you have more than 20 units, or you're building an apartment complex with more than 20 units, I believe. We're seeing some reports of developers building apartment complexes or units of buildings with like 15 units, just under the 20 units, and building multiples of those. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about, A? And B, do you think that we need to change those rules to make sure developers aren't skirting them to not have to?
So I know the Housing Bureau is looking at all of this data, and I have pledged previously that if the inclusionary housing process needs to be tweaked, we would certainly bring it to the council for a tweak. I will also say, on a positive note, we've actually seen quite a few development permits pulled for housing that includes inclusionary housing. We've seen our first Central City project get its permits, so we're starting to see signs of life. Many people predicted that the farther away we got from that January 1st deadline last year, the more activity we would actually see. But I remain open-minded about it, and if we need to tweak the code to ensure that we've got the right economic formula so that people's affordable housing projects pencil out, I'm certainly open to it.
Briefly address baseball and just recent meetings with the Portland Diamond Project. How do you feel about it? How do you feel like things are going?
So I have personally not participated in any meetings recently with the Portland Diamond Project, but I know members of my staff have been engaged in check-ins, is how I describe them, with the Portland Diamond Project. I know they continue to move forward.
And I'll ask you this as well. We've got a big meeting coming up, ODOT, I think on Tuesday, talking about the Rose Quarter project. Has your stance at all changed on this project right through the Heartland?
No. No. This is a project, this didn't just show up at City Hall. This is something that's been in the works for years, and it's my understanding that at the regional level and at the state level, some 80 different projects were vetted before the legislature settled on the 3 that it wanted to fund. There have been extensive public hearings on this at Metro, in Salem, leading up to this process, and I continue to support this. I supported this during the Central City 2035 planning process, and I support it now. And I'll just add a little color commentary since I think people are pooped out here. People are concerned about safety on our streets. They're concerned about congestion, and they are concerned about the lack of investment in biking and walking and other active infrastructure. There's an opportunity here to make significant new investments. And while I know some people are disappointed that the caps that are being proposed over I-5 aren't necessarily robust enough to support buildings, they are robust enough to support more open green spaces in a part of our community that lacks them, and it creates this really once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reconnect the historic Albina neighborhood. So there are definitely trade-offs here, and I don't want to sugarcoat that, but on balance, I think it's a good thing and I support it. Great, thanks everybody.